Hello, this is Tiara,
Hello, this is Ali.
and this is the Goddess Vibration. Welcome back to our podcast. We're happy to have you here. I don't think that we have ever talked about this yet, which is so funny considering we're a spiritual new age podcast.
We
We're
have
gonna, well, yeah,
just
maybe in passing in like other episodes.
no, we have in other episodes. Just
Yeah.
if you are a loyal listener, we definitely have. But we haven't talked about all of them. We've only talked about like maybe 3 or 4 of them.
And Allie's talking about the clairsenses. So before we dive into this, I do want to define what that is because I feel like there's a lot of confusion around the clairs, what they are. And I didn't know this until we started looking into this, but there's actually 9 of these things. And essentially, what they are is their gifts or psychic abilities. And what the spiritual community has done is it has taken these spiritual gifts and categorized them into classes or like, you know, I don't know, that categorize them into different types. So if you have some type of psychic ability or spiritual gifts, you might be able to relate to this list of clair senses that we're going to describe. But Allie and I have experience with most of these, and Allie actually has experienced all 9 of them. So this should be a very interesting discussion because, I am really curious about what others have experienced when it comes to the clairs. And I'm of the impression that there are probably more clairs and they just haven't been categorized.
That's certainly a possibility. I've had a lot of weird shit happen to me over the years. I've
Oh, I know.
experienced a lot of weird shit.
Right. And, if you're on a spiritual journey, I feel like that kind of comes with the package. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, those of us on this journey experience weird shit. And there's some people who are not even on a spiritual journey who experience weird shit. And then when they get to this spiritual journey, they're just like, oh, that's why I experienced that. Um, so ultimately, obviously, when it comes to everyone on this planet, the goal is for everyone to experience the spiritual journey and, the expansion process and self actualize. Whether that's going to happen or not remains to be seen. But I feel like the clairs are so fascinating because it gives it tries to make sense of something that we don't fully understand, but it kind of gives us a little something to go off of. And I think that's cool. And it is helpful when you're on a journey like this.
And because there's so many Claires, this might be a two-parter. We're gonna see where we get in this episode, but we don't want to talk your ears off either. So we'll see.
Well, we do want to talk your ears off, but only if you're willing to listen to what we have to say. Because if you are, then it's a win win for both of us, right?
Sure, but not. I mean, nine. It depends how deep in depth we go into these 9 Claires. I mean, nine's a lot to cover in one episode.
You're right. You're right. So I'm going to list these off, all 9 of the Claires, and we're just going to explore these one by one.
That's the
Again,
best way
this
to do it.
yeah, so this could be a two-parter or possibly a three-part series. I'm not quite sure yet. But 9 Claires is a lot, especially considering I don't even think this is all of them. So I'm going to list these off. I'm going to say what they are, and then, as I mentioned, we'll just kind of dive in. The first Claire is called clairvoyance, which stands for clear seeing. And I kind of want to give a definition and like more of a deep explanation for that, but that's okay. We'll come back to that. The second is called clairaudience, that is clear hearing. The third is called claircognizance or clear knowing. There is one called clear intellect or clear thinking. Another one is called clear empathy or clear emotion. There is one called clear sentience, which means clear physical feeling. There's also a very interesting one called clairtangency, which is clear touching. clairsalience, clear smelling, and the last one on our list is called clairgustance or clear tasting. The only one that I don't see on here is a clair tied to plants or being able to communicate to plants. That might be under one of these. So, what might happen as we go through this discussion is we might get into a clair, and then you'll see that there are different gifts that fit under that specific clair. It'll make more sense once we start talking about it. But the first one I want to dive into is clairvoyance. This is probably the one you guys have heard of most. I know it's the one I've heard of most. And basically, the way it's described is the ability to see with your third eye or even like your physical eyes things. So, what it says you receive pictures in the form of images in your mind's eye. So, when they say mind's eye, we're talking about the third eye. They might be vivid or dreams or visions or mental images or like mini movies, which I think Ali has experienced the mini movie one. You might also be able to see colors or colors of auras or the images. It says the images can be literal or metaphorical, which is interesting because how do you see a metaphorical image? This also says you might be inclined towards this, Claire, if you're a visual person or you find visual solutions to your issues, or you might be good at like visual spatial problems or good at directions or something along those lines.
How would you say your clairvoyance is?
Well, I have definitely experienced dreams, visions, mental images. The only thing I haven't experienced, well, no, I think I have experienced the mini movies too. The only thing I can't do is see auras in front of me. Like you know how Ali you can see auras of entities when we're channeling?
Yes.
I can't do that. Like when we're channeling, I don't see auras.
Interesting. I know that you have seen colors before though. So what are the colors
I
that you're
have.
seeing?
So I've been able to, and I don't know if other people can do this. I'm sure they can, where like I will hear sound or melodies or music and I will see the colors of the sound.
Oh, there's a
And
term for that. And
it's very beautiful.
yeah, there's a term for that. And Pharrell Williams also has that same ability.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, like that's actually like what inspires him to make music is like when he is making music, like he can see the colors and he can like he can like paint the picture in his mind and like his ability is actually really cool. There's actually like a clinical term for this too.
Yes, I think there is. So that's what I mean. Going into this, we're going to see like different terms and abilities that fall in that category of clairvoyance.
Clairvoyance for me is, I mean, it's a big part of who I am because my third eye is just so active and it's probably overactive. Well, actually, I know for a fact it's overactive. But in terms of me and my journey, like the vivid dreams it goes beyond just vivid dreaming for me. We can have a separate episode like talking about dreams. I was like, well, I could probably go into depth, but that will probably take up this entire episode. So
Right.
we will skip that.
All right.
But I definitely see visions. I get mental images and I have seen movies. Ironically enough, I actually ended up seeing like a mini movie when I had my Kundalini awakening. That's a whole other story.
Wow.
But I can also see auras, which is so cool. And it's like beyond seeing auras at this time. Like sometimes if you establish a relationship with the being that you're channeling, they will actually show more to you than just their aura. Like I have seen faces, I have seen bodies, I have seen like silhouettes, I have seen like symbols like from some of these entities, and it is just so cool. And I was talking to a friend about this, and he was saying to me like the more that they show you, it means that like the entity feels more comfortable and more safe with you. And so they're like, if they're showing you like their faces and if they're showing you their bodies and if they're showing you like specifics, then not only is that a testament to your psychic abilities, but it's also a testament to your relationship you have with them, because that is like a gift. And I was like, oh my God, I had no idea that that was even a thing. Like, how cool. So I learned a lot that day.
That's amazing. And I think there's something else that falls under clairvoyance, the one where you can perceive events from the future. I thought that that was, for some reason, I thought clairvoyance was you can
That's not clear.
perceive what's going to happen in the future.
I don't think that that's clairvoyance.
Okay, so we might get to that one. But for a while, I thought that's what that was.
That makes sense. I think a lot of these are also like interchangeably used, like where one ability could be part of different categories.
Right, right. So that's why I'm like, as we go through this, we might discover more. And I was almost thinking if maybe we should create our own list as we discover more going through this process and based on our stories. But so let's continue to dive in because we've got 8 more to go through. Um, the next one here I mentioned is called clairaudience. And this one is really interesting because this one is clear hearing or the ability to hear voices or messages from the spiritual realms. So this says you might hear them in your ears or your mouth of God chakra. And I don't know which chakra that is unless they're talking about the throat chakra.
I don't know. I also don't know.
I'm assuming they mean the throat chakra because that's speaking and hearing. This says an example is you may be driving and suddenly you hear left turn. Even though you are the only one in the car, you might be inclined towards clairaudience if you are naturally attuned towards sounds, music, or toning, which is very, very interesting.
The God chakra is the crown chakra.
Oh, it's the crown chakra.
Yes.
The mouth of God?
Yes, it's the crown chakra. It's a
Got it.
reference to the crown.
Okay. So it's when they're saying you may hear them in your ears or your mouth of God chakra, they're talking about your ears or your crown chakra, which makes sense. And I think Ali and I have both experienced this one.
I absolutely have. You know, I have to tell you a really fascinating story where I have been presented with music before the music's even been released by like entities or spiritual beings.
What?
Yeah.
So you hear the song before it's released, like you know what the beat is and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember
Oh,
that happened to me
wow.
once?
Yes, I think I remember that.
Yes. And it was all like accurate. Blew my mind.
Crazy. I think this was the first gift to present itself to me because I remember it just like the example. I remember hearing voices talk to me clearly, like clearly and distinctly, and looking around and being like, what? And I have this example of when I was at in my bathroom and I was like getting ready to go to work or something like that. And I hear clear as day catalytic converter. This is before I had really dove into my spiritual journey, but I just hear it out of nowhere. And I'm just like, well, what the fuck? What am I going to do with that? Okay, go about my day. Then I start having car issues and I take it to a mechanic. And the first thing he says to me is, oh, your catalytic converter has gone out. And I was just like, wow. Uh, so it was actually this particular Claire that presented itself to me first and sent me on the spiritual journey. So this one's a fascinating one, and it's incredible to be able to do this. I've done it a lot with mediumship. Most of the mediumship I've done has been clairaudient. So I hear them speak to me. They present themselves to me, usually verbally first. Sometimes I will feel their emotion, but oftentimes it's like through talking. So I know for me specifically when it comes to like mediumship and even talking to entities, usually it's through clairaudience.
Yeah, I know that one's very prominent for you.
Which is interesting because I don't feel like I'm musically inclined or tonally inclined or anything. So I don't know.
I definitely am musically inclined. I've always have been. Like every music teacher I've ever had says I have like perfect pitch. And if like they play a key like on the piano, I can match that like first try.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I'm definitely musically inclined, which doesn't surprise me that when the song was presented to me. So I do have a link to this spirit. And so when the song was presented to me, I was just like, okay, that's nothing I've ever heard before. And then like I think a month later is when the song got released and it was the same beat.
Man, I freaking love that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I love clairaudience. I've used it in multiple ways, like not only with music, but I can also have like conversations with beings, or I can have conversations with my soul family, or anything that really has to do with any 5D and higher stuff. Clairaudience is very an important. It's a very important skill and a very important clair for me.
Absolutely. So the next one, this is also one that presented itself to me first. It was this along with clairaudience that it presented itself to me first. This one is called claircognizance, and this one is clear knowing or experiencing a sudden knowing. It's something that you know to be true in your mind's eye, even though you did not hear or see it. It can be like instant insights or a download. And this says that it often manifests itself as instincts, which I think is really interesting because we all have instincts, right? With claircognizance, it's like, for me, it feels like something just pops into my head out of nowhere and it feels invasive. Like it's not like anything I was considering or thinking of. It just kind of shows up in my mind's eye out of nowhere. And oftentimes, that information is spot on. So I, it's interesting that this says it manifests as instincts because I wouldn't initially tie instincts to claircognizance, but I guess it makes sense.
So are you saying that you know things are going to happen before they actually happen?
Sometimes. And it's just a knowing. It's not like I see a vision and it's not like I'm told anything. It's just like a knowing.
Well, I don't think you have to see a vision. I mean, is that what the statement's saying, that you have to see a vision before it happens?
No, it's just I know that some people do, but for claircognizance, that's not, it's like not visual. It's just you just know things and you don't know why you know things. You don't know why that information is suddenly in your head. I think this is what my sister experienced when okay, so background story. We took a trip a couple years ago to Vegas. It was me and my sister. Ali came, some of my sister's friends came, and my sister got sick on the trip. But she said, like, after the facts, like after she had gone to the hospital and everything, she was like, I just had this knowing that I was going to get sick. And I was just like, wow, it would have been nice to, know that first, but okay. Um, and I think it was the same thing. I think she just had this sudden insight or knowing about the fact that she was going to get sick, and then it happened. And I do know that this is something that runs in my lineage on my mother's side as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, my grandmother has the same ability.
Well, I know like your twin soul, for example, I know that he has it very differently where at night he would have dreams of something happening and then the next day it would be on the news that it happened.
See, okay, this is where I get confused because I'm like, okay, is that claircognizance or is that clairvoyance? Because he had it in a dream.
Well, this is why I'm saying like I think a lot of these like spiritual gifts that we're going to be talking about, I do think that they fall under more than one category of the clair.
Right.
I think it's a little bit of both. Like I've experienced both, not so much with having visions and seeing it show up on the news the next day, but like I just know things. Like I
Right.
remember that I had an important meeting online and like no one ever knocks on my door. No one ever rings my doorbell. Like no one like ever. And I knew I was just like, okay, I have this important meeting. My doorbell's going to ring. I don't know how I knew that. I
Yes.
don't know why I knew that. I just knew my doorbell was going to ring while I was in this meeting. And long behold, my doorbell rang.
You know, this happened to me the other day when I was walking. Um, I was walking and I was like, all right, it looks like rain, but I don't have my umbrella. But you know what? I'm going to get home and then it's going to start raining. I just know that.
Oh, I have
So
that
I
all
got,
the time.
yes, like I got home and then 3 minutes later it was pouring outside.
Oh
Like,
yeah, no.
just like,
That happens to me like every other week.
right? It's so wild.
Yeah. Like you can do that. Like you can predict it with weather. You can predict it with, people showing up at your door. It could be anything with other people. Like if you witness something, if you're outside walking and, you see two people and you're just like, oh, something's gonna, like that person's gonna trip. I have done that. Like I have been walking to a destination and I see people like across the street and I don't know where it comes from. I'm just like that poor man's going to trip and then long behold he tripped.
Have you had the experience where it's like you know a song's gonna come on or you think about
Yes.
a movie and then like the
Yes.
next day, yeah.
Yes. All the time. All the time. This
Yeah.
is like my life. This always happens to me. Like, so something about me, I have very strong senses, like probably stronger than most people. Not trying to toot my own horn here, but probably more than most people. So I don't know. I don't know how I know things. I don't know why I know things. It just happens. And I'm very in tune with my senses. I'm very in tune with my clairs. And it still to this day blows my mind when, like, when I feel this instinct of knowing and then it happens. Like, it still blows my mind. I don't know if or when that will ever go away.
You know, we're going through this list, and my twin soul also is very, well, he used to be very, very attuned to his clairs, very sensitive, powerful gifts. Like, I don't know if I have the words to fully describe what he could have been capable of had he, you know, stuck to the soul mission and his growth and ascension. Um, I think he's capable of all of these too. He has talked about having all of these and being much, much more sensitive than I, because he is the emotional body. So it makes sense that all the gifts would be concentrated on his end. So, man, I really hope that one day we can get him on to talk about some of these because I'd be curious to know like what he's experienced and his perspective on some of this. He has, for a fact, I know clairvoyance, but he can see the dead, like people who have died. Not
And
only
he
can he see that, but he can see how they died as well in the image that he sees of the dead being or entity. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say you finish my thought, that he can also see how they die, and
Yes.
he can see actually the aftermath of how they died.
Yes. And with his third eye. And I'm just blown away by that. Like, what? Wow. So he's pretty amazing when it comes to his gifts and abilities. Hopefully, one day we can get him on the show to talk about that. Um,
It would be interesting to get him on the show for a couple of topics because he's also a very powerful empath.
yes.
And so it would be really interesting to get a male's perspective on being an empath because I feel like being an empath is more of a feminine trait. And so it'd be really interesting to hear like the male side and male perspective of things.
Yes. He's a very powerful empath. And he has even talked about like being able to feel the emotions of not only everyone in his vicinity, but when he walks past people, knowing everything about their day just by walking past them. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. So it would be excellent to get him on the show. That's going to be my mission, is to try to get him on the show. So stay tuned for that, you guys. But we're going to keep going through the list. The next one here is, this is one I haven't really heard of as frequently. This is clairintellect, and this says that it's tied to clear thinking. So this happens when your thoughts can manifest as your intuition. You may notice in a conversation that your words come through, and although they seem like thoughts, they are actually words from a higher source of consciousness, and this can manifest as having epiphanies commonly. You may be inclined towards clear intellect if you are very left brained and a linear thinker. And I know that I have done this to people before.
I have too.
So this is an interesting one because I don't think that this definition fully captures what this is. This is something that's, it's similar to channeling, especially when they're talking about being in conversation and then just saying words that are coming through that are your words but aren't your words. It almost reminds me of what channeling would be.
Well, I'm just trying to think of a better way. This is a horrible description. I'm not
No, it
gonna
really is. That's
lie.
why I was like, oh my God, we need to like create our own list because some of this is just like it doesn't fully capture what the Claire is. So that's going on my to-dos list. But yeah, it's well, and this says that it's like thoughts that can manifest as your intuition, which is confusing because I particularly for me, I was always under the impression that intuition influences thoughts. But they're saying it's the other way
Okay, we're gonna
around.
go into channeling first.
Okay.
Right. So we're gonna go into channeling for a second. So there's like two ways that you can channel, right? Like you can either hear it or feel it. Right. I think that's what most people do, but you also have the ability where they just kind of take over your voice. So my question
Right.
is that similar to what Claire intellect is?
I
Like
think it
when they
is.
take over.
I think it is. But I think so. The way that they're saying it is that that will happen without you consciously knowing that that's what's happening.
Well, I know that that has happened to both your twin soul and I. Like it's happened like I know for a fact that like if he has sent us messages where it's like they take over his fingers, right? Like
Yeah.
cuz there'll be a time that I'm just like this makes no sense and he was like I didn't send that. And I'm like, "What? What do you mean you didn't send that? Like it's from you." And he was like, "No, it was like a download. Like I was writing, I was in the middle of a message and all of a sudden I got a download and all of a sudden my original thought changed to what the download wanted me to write."
Did it resonate later?
Yes and no, but I'm just saying like I just find that really interesting that it's not only that they can take over your voice, but it's like they can take over your fingers, right? Like mid message.
Yeah. 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 Well, and this has come through for me. It's come through in thoughts can manifest as your intuition. Okay, this has happened a lot for me for tarot when I'm doing tarot for other people. Because when I'm going to tell them what came through in tarot, the thoughts will come through as the intuition. So I think I get what they're saying. Um, and it's like, it's me giving them the information, but it's essentially the information that's coming from the intuition. And sometimes you will see this happen when someone goes to talk to someone and they're giving them guidance, and the guidance is like profound and spot on. And then you might be the one giving that, and then you walk away and you're like, I don't know where any of that came from. That's
Right. And
often clair intellect.
right. And that has happened, I think, to all three of us.
Yes.
I just know that I know when you channel, it can happen with your voice, but I also know when him and I were in contact, like he would send a message and I'd be like, this makes no sense. And he'd be like, that wasn't me who sent it. It was like, I mean, he explains it as like, it was like I was possessed and this is what the being had to say. And I was just like, whoa,
He's done
that's
that for me too.
crazy.
Yeah. He has done that for me as well. And I've always been like, whatever, Sean. But oftentimes when I think back to the message, I'll be like, oh, that's why he said that. So that's a fascinating one, actually, now that we've dove into it, me and that word.
Yeah, I think clear intellect is really, really fascinating. I think they're all fascinating in their own right. But it's just so interesting, like diving deep into this and see the other ways that we are connected and how we just know things or how, you know, outside of our conscious mind, because I think the statistic is we only use like 10% of our brains. So it's like what goes on in the other 90%. And I feel like the clairs are like tied to the other 90% that we aren't consciously aware of.
We should add to the channeling list to channel if there are more clairs, like get more information about if there are.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. I'm doing that right now.
Very cool. Allie's the channeling list manager. So I am going to dive into another one here. This one is called Claire Empathy. And the way this is described is really interesting. It stands for clear emotion. And they say on this particular list that it is sensing other people's emotions, thoughts, or symptoms. And it's an awareness of emotional energy. For example, when others are crying, that could make you cry as well. They also say that it is important as a clear empath to understand how to balance your empathy, how to not take on the stuff of other people or walk into energy fields. The difference between clair empath and sentience is empaths sense the emotion, and with clairsentience, you physically feel it. We haven't gotten to clairsentience yet, but we will. So I know for a fact that my twin soul is a clair empath. I'm wondering if this is his strongest gift because, yeah, he has talked about being able to do all of this, like sense other people's emotions, sense what they want or what they're thinking, sense if they're unwell, walk past people and sense their entire day, like to an advanced extent where I'm just like, how do you function? Like literally, how do you function when all these people you're interacting with, you're feeling them and you can tell what's going on with them just by being in their energetic aura. Like it's just, I don't know. This is one that it doesn't sound pleasant to me. Like to be honest, I'm gonna be honest. This does not sound very pleasant to me.
Tiara's not an empath. I am. And honestly, I always describe being an empath as a blessing and a curse.
Mm.
And for most, being an empath is an absolute curse. Like, I've talked to other empaths. I have had deep conversations about this, and being an empath is not easy because you
Mm,
are literally taking on other people's emotions, feelings. You can feel their sadness, you can feel their happiness, you can feel anything, you can feel their pain. Feeling their pain is the worst. And the the way that the way that the world is, like the state of the world is, being an empath in today's society is certainly not easy because most people that you walk by or most people that you interact with are not happy. As we've already have discussed in Has Humanity Given Up? So it's really hard to be in environments with people that are just stressed out, anxiety ridden, low vibe, like worried. And it's just like, as an empath, you take on all of that emotion, and it's not fair. It it doesn't feel fair. It doesn't seem fair. It's hard to wrap your brain around it.
yeah.
And honestly, for a lot of people and to other empaths that I've had conversations with, it to them it's just like it's a curse. And honestly, I hated being an empath. Not that I'm not one. It's just I have learned how to balance being an empath, which is ultimately the goal.
Yes. And that's why everything Ali said is why it sounds unpleasant to me. However, I will say that I have been able to do this with pets, and I've been able to do it with thoughts for people I'm close to, for partners, spouses, and particularly for when it comes to like the physical symptoms or emotions with pets or animals. And I don't know why, but that's the extent or degree I've been able to do this.
So, something interesting about being an empath, and we are going to have a completely separate episode where you'll probably be hearing me talk a lot, is that there are 10 different kinds of empaths. And I'm not going to go in depth to what all those are, but I am going to list a couple because this is what Tiara is experiencing. So there's the claircognizant empath, there's a psychometric empath, an animal empath, a geo a geomagn I don't know how to pronounce that. Sorry.
Geomagnetic.
Yes, geomagnetic empath, um, precognitive empath, an emotional empath, a telepathic empath, a plant
Oh.
empath, a medium empath, and a physical receptive empath.
Okay, I know for a fact I've done at least 3 or 4 of those.
Yeah, I've done like 8.
Yeah.
So we're gonna like dive deep into like being an empath. I have a lot of insight and a lot of things I want to talk about, but clair empathy is it is a very complex. It's so in depth. There is so much more to it, especially like as you learn that there are different kinds of empaths. And so like we could do like a whole series on empaths and what it means to be one. But it is rough out there. My heart goes out to all the empaths. I've been there. If you are struggling with being an empath, I encourage you to reach out to me because I have learned how to set my boundaries. I've learned how to balance that. I have learned how to not take on other people's emotions. And now I've used my empathic for the good versus dreading it. And that's really the ultimate goal of any empath.
You know, so it sounds like just based on the list of Claire's under the Claire empathy category that there's a telepath one. So if you can hear other people's thoughts, that is empathic,
That's
correct?
well, it's an empathic ability. Yes.
Ah, okay. So yes, I have done that a couple times. I did it a lot with my husband, and it was very strange, and it would freak us both the fuck out. But it would be like I knew what he was thinking about, or and I would say it to him, and we would both be in alignment or agreement. And there's been a couple times where, like, if he's had a physical pain in a specific part of his body, then I would feel it too. So it was really strange. And I didn't know that it had a name. So it's nice to know that, I wasn't fucking going insane.
No, you're definitely not going insane. I mean, insane. I mean, 10 different types of empaths. Like, that's a lot of empathic ability. Like, that was just
Absolutely.
loaded in that list.
And I would be curious to know how much of those on that particular sub list my twin soul has experienced. Probably all of them.
Well, I've sent him this list, and I think he said that he's about the same as me, like 8, around 8.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're both at like 8. I might be 9. There's definitely one I haven't done, but I might be 8 or 9, and he was around 7 and 8.
Dang, that's wild. And that is at a 3D frequency.
Yeah.
That's how powerful his gifts are.
I know. It's crazy.
That's wild. Wild.
But we are just at the halfway mark, and we're already like 42 minutes in.
Yeah, I think I want to save the rest for part 2. Because we did say this could be 2 or 3 parts. We'll probably also dive, like Ali said, into an entire empath episode, and that'll be part 3.
Maybe part 4. It depends on how much we have to say. And like I said, I would love to get her twin soul on our podcast.
I might be able to do that sooner rather than later. Now that he's got a set schedule, I'll put that on my list.
Okay. I hope you all have enjoyed diving into the clairs, and we've given more clarity on what they are and how they're used and how they can manifest in different ways, because we've experienced a lot of interesting / weird shit out there.
And it's only getting weirder, guys.
Yeah.
Which I love, because I love weird shit.
Yeah, isn't there a word for that, or isn't there like a term for that?
There is, and I found it once. So for those of you who aren't aware, I love weird stuff, and the weirder it is, the more I love it. And it's not like sexual. It's just like this preoccupation and obsession and fascination with weird stuff. Like stuff that's unusual or never been seen before, or stuff that other people would find outrageous, but I see it and I'm like, oh my God, I love this. And I found this out about myself when I was watching a documentary about men who like to put on like really tight plastic skin and walk around as dolls. And I was watching this documentary about this whole thing, and they have a convention where all these men come together and they put on their latex skin and their latex masks and their hair and makeup, and they present themselves as sexy dolls. And I fucking loved it. Oh my God, I loved it so much.
Yeah, that all went over my head when she was explaining it. I was like, so putting on tight skin. That's all I had to hear to be like, yeah, that's not for me.
Yeah, so if you guys know weird stuff or stumble upon stuff like that that's just bizarre and unusual, please email it to me, because I'm going to love it. There's a good chance I'm going to absolutely fucking love it.
And I just want to note real quick, when I was talking about Pharrell Williams, because I had a second to look it up, it's called synesthesia.
Yes.
Yes. A subjective sensation or image of a sense as a color other than the one as a sound being stimulated. So his music and everything, like, that's why his music is so colorful, because he actually sees the colors as he's creating and listening to beats.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love it.
I do too.
Very cool. All right, you guys. Well, thank you for tuning in. I hope that this was helpful and gave you a little bit of insight into the clairs. We're going to dive into the second set of clairs and part 2, so please stay tuned.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week, and we will catch you next time.
All right. Bye-bye, you guys.
Bye.